we have had a number of very good bills that have been introduced. I'll be going over these in some more depth in the training program that we will start at 2 o'clock. But let me just give you kind of an overview. There are 4 bills that have been introduced this year. That there are some that are in the House and several that are in the Senate, and some overlap there. And when they're in both houses, they're identical bills. The first one is the Fair Maps bill, the Fair Maps Act, and that's that as such is only in the House. But this is a model bill to create an independent commission. If you've been following this for a while, you may recall that last year we had a bill that was introduced, also with the primary sponsor being Pricey Harrison, and that bill was we called it informally the gold standard bill, because it really represented an ideal model bill of what an independent commission should look like. And this bill is very similar to that bill, some tweaks to improve it even more. It's certainly it's a classic commission bill with a citizen commission with some role for the legislature in selecting them, but where the commission itself draws the maps and approves the maps. The second bill there is redistricting criteria, and that's introduced in both the House and the Senate. One of the challenges that we have in North Carolina in getting, decent redistricting is that, in fact, what there is in legislation in our Constitution on how the maps are drawn is really very limited. It says that the districts have to be contiguous, and they are single-member districts, so just one person per district, and they are not supposed to split counties, and they must, of course, have equal population. That's required by federal law. So we have, so that's about all there is. There's nothing in there on, other than saying the legislature draws the maps. There's nothing on how they have to do it, whether they have to take comments or hold hearings, what criteria they have to meet for the map. But this bill would really try to fill some of that gap by setting very specific criteria for how the maps are drawn. Excuse me. And in addition, in particular, barring the use of political data, because you really have to have political data if you're going to draw a gerrymander, so you know which voters you want to include and which ones you want to leave out. So this would close that important sort of gap in our system, and not explicitly outlaw gerrymandering. And it would also include some new measures that have been developed at Duke, in part, and other universities across the country, and that have been used successfully in 2019 in state court, to identify what is a gerrymander and to convince the court to ask for the maps to be redrawn. And this method uses a large set of simulated maps and uses that to determine whether the map that they've drawn, fits in with the overall pattern of the maps of what our geography would normally deliver, or if it's way off to one side. So that is an important bill, and in some ways breaks new ground. I don't believe, as far as I've been able to determine, that other states have yet turned to this measure, which is this has been one of the real challenges in gerrymandering, is how do you distinguish between what the geography itself would produce just neutrally, and what is maybe a little bit of a lean but not too bad, and something that's extreme and really needs to be prevented. So this is a very interesting bill, and we hope that it will be heard. Then we have the county cluster process. I mentioned very briefly that we have this sort of conflict between keeping counties whole, as required by our Constitution, and having districts that are the same size. You can't do both of those. And so this bill addresses the procedure that was set out by the North Carolina Supreme Court several years ago to try to bridge that gap. And it uses this somewhat strange method called county clusters, where you start with the larger counties like Wake or Mecklenburg that can each hold multiple districts, and then you look at say 2 adjacent counties that could maybe have 2 districts between them, but one would be only in one of the districts, and one would cut across the 2, or whatever. Like how you can then, and then you go on to 3 groups of 3 counties, and they have to be next to each other, and 4 and 5 and 6 and even 7 until you've got all your counties accounted for. And the way that that's been done has been kind of mysterious, how they actually pick those clusters. And one legislator said, there's only one way to do it, I guess. We're going to go with that. That wasn't really the case. And so this is a method that uses, again, computer analysis to identify all the possible county clusters, and then to enable to analyze them and see which one is the most neutral and really represents the sort of, it's right in the middle of what you would expect to see in North Carolina in terms of where people live and where the different parties are strongest and so forth. And say, okay, this map, this one will give you, a good starting point to actually draw the districts within those clusters. And then finally, we have a bill called Fix Our Democracy, which is very much a North Carolina version of the Fix Our Democracy. I'm sorry, of the For the People Act in Congress, which is something that the League and the national level is strongly supporting. And it has a whole range of really good reforms of bringing back judicial election public funding, which is something the League worked for many years successfully, and then it was eliminated more recently. And just a wide range of pro-voting and pro-voter reforms, as well as including the same text for an independent commission as is in the Fair Maps, in the Fair Maps bill that was introduced and that I talked about earlier. So we have really a very good set of bills, and the challenge is going to be, how do we get these bills actually heard in committee? Right now, they're all sitting in rules, which is never a good sign. So we need them to be taken up and heard in committee, and they would be amended most likely, or pieces of one combined with pieces of another, or entirely new things brought forward in the amendment process. But the important thing is that the bills have to actually, be heard for us to be able to get something adopted. So that's what we're going to be working on, is trying to encourage that these bills be considered in committee.